Hey folks, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Today is a super exciting day, and that's because there's a brand new update of 10.4.5 that is now available via the App Store. Now, I'm never around to do a video on the fly when these sort of things hit. I'm really excited. 10.4.5, usually it's sort of disappointing when there's like a double point update because it's usually a reliability or bug issue that needs to get ironed out quickly. You don't get a lot of new features, etc. But with 10.4.5, there's a lot of new features and there's a lot of updates in terms of performance and reliability. If we take a look at the release notes here, new features and enhancements, and the list just keeps going. This is something that I really have grown to appreciate about Apple is that when they do an update, aside from those double point updates that I mentioned, there are tons of updates. I mean, there's literally hundreds and hundreds here. So I'm not going to dig into all that. But the biggest ones, obviously, are these optimized performance updates and the increased number of tracks and channels that we can use. At WWDC 2019, which is Apple's developer conference that they hold every year, they did a demonstration of the new Mac Pro with Logic Pro. And they mentioned this is a brand new version of Logic. So ever since that presentation, I've been checking the App Store daily because I'm kind of obsessed. And with that, we now see an increased number of tracks and channels, up to 1,000 stereo channel strips, 1,000 software instruments, 1,000 auxiliary channels, 1,000 external MIDI tracks, and up to 12 cents per channel. Now, I can't even imagine a world where I will need that many tracks or sends for any track in my session, but clearly somebody out there does need it. Pretty awesome. How do they accomplish all this? Well, the big one that we're all going to be pretty excited by is that there is now an optimization when it comes to loading your sessions. What does that mean exactly? Well, if we take a look in the mixer here, there's some new behavior. And if you look at the plugins on these channel strips, the names are sort of muted. And if we go down here and find some instruments, such as Ultrabeat, the name again is muted. What it means is that when Logic loads your project, Logic will analyze the project and determine if there are any instruments or plugins that are not necessary for playback. They're not really playing a part in your session, and that enables Logic to load faster. That's amazing. So now your projects will load faster, they'll save faster, they'll close down faster. This will be determined if a track, for example, is frozen or powered down, or I'm sure there's a bunch of other states that have to exist for Logic to determine that your track is not needed for playback. To access this particular setting, if we go to File, we go to Project Settings, under General, we now have this new option of opening project and only load plugins needed for project playback. If you feel that you don't want Logic to pick and choose these particular plugins and channel strips for you, you could turn this off, but I'm very happy about this fact because it'll help my project load. Now, if I determine that this particular channel strip here, I do want the plugins available, I do want it loaded, I can just turn off the free state and look at that. The plugins are now enabled and ready to go. Super quick, super easy. I love it. So that's going to be the big one that everybody's going to hit on. I want to hit on a couple of new features I'm very excited by besides the obvious. So number 2 on my list is there's now a new auto scroll feature when it comes to the mixer. So what does auto scroll mean? If we go to the view menu here, we go right down here, we have auto scroll to selection and we can turn it off and we can turn it on. What it means is if I go to the top track in my session, I have a pretty big session. I mean, 234 tracks. This is a demo session. If I go to that top track and I open the mixer, it's immediately in focus and ready to go. If I go to the bottom track and open the mixer once again, it's in focus and immediately ready to go. And that's for everything in between. I'm just going to poke around. So you no longer have to go hunting for your channel strips in the mixer. You can just click on the one you want within the arrange page and it's immediately there for you. If I turn this off and I go to that top track, you can see that the track that I have highlighted, I got to go searching for now. So I much prefer auto scroll. To piggyback off of that idea, this one is amazing. Number 3 is if we go to a send field and we shift click on the ring of the send field. So you can see there that send 1 is sending to bus 29 and it's going to a large hall reverb. If I shift and click the ring, Look at that. Logic highlights that particular channel strip 3 times, the auxiliary channel strip, so we know immediately where it is. It navigates us to that channel strip. That's amazing. That's wonderful. So again, shift click right there. Beautiful. That makes light work of navigating a large session. Now, as Logic users, whenever there's an update, I think one of the first questions we tend to ask is, are there any updates in terms of plugin or instrument GUIs? And I think that's a fair question. Logic still has plugins and instruments that have the same GUI from when it was Logic 9, Logic 8, and it's just not as cool as the updated GUIs. For the first couple of updates, the Logic team at Apple updated like 10 or 15 plugins at a time. Now it's kind of hit a snail's pace. Well, we have a couple plugins that have been updated in terms of GUI and some that have changed enough so it's more useful. So first things first, we have a new Deesser, the Deesser 2, which, if we're going to be candid, the one plugin in the Logic repertoire that has been pretty disappointing has been the Deesser. The Deesser has never worked very good. It didn't do a good job at de-essing. It was difficult to use. So this is huge. This is a wonderful addition, and it actually has meters and functions that are helpful to us. So I just want to quickly demonstrate. This isn't going to be a deep dive into the Deesser, but I have a track here where there's some whispering, so the S's should be particularly obvious. And I'm just going to mess around, and you can quickly watch as I mess around with the new Deesser. I'm going to filter solo on. Let's just take a listen.
VHS. 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 VHS.
That's super quick. And there's 2 different modes, relative or absolute. Relative is going to provide you the most transparent and dynamic option. Once again, this is not a deep dive. It's just a real quick demonstration how freaking awesome this thing is. Beyond that, we have an updated expander. So I'm going to go find a drum track real quick, and I'll select that one. So the expander, I've loved the Logic expander. It actually has been very useful, but in terms of meters and GUI and being able to use it, sometimes visual stimulation helps. And the expander didn't provide very much in terms of visual stimulation, but now it's quite a sizable plugin. It's pretty awesome. I have this drum track here. Let me turn this off real quick. And an expander does the opposite of a compressor. A compressor compresses, so it reduces dynamic range. The expander expands, so it creates dynamic range. So I'm just going to mess around real quick, and let's see what this accomplishes. So that kick becomes immediately more apparent and kind of tucks down the claps when it hits. Awesome. Now, there's one plugin that did not receive so much of a GUI update in terms of a brand new look, but the ring shifter, if you take a look at that, it looks pretty crazy, right? That's because the ring shifter now has a totally resizable GUI. It doesn't distort when you expand it beyond 100%. It looks good. And honestly, if we open, look how fast that is. If we open the retro synth, and I'm going to load the instrument, if we kind of compare it side by side, obviously the ring shifter looks a little dated, but it seems pretty comparable. I feel pretty good about the way it looks. The one other plugin or instrument that has seen some degree of evolution has been Sculpture. If we open up Sculpture, it looks just like it did in Logic 9, which is sort of a bummer. But we can once again resize the GUI, and now all the millions of crazy controls contained within this plugin or instrument, we now have access to. It doesn't distort when we expand it. It's much clearer to work with versus, let's open up the EFM1. And if I expand this, it starts to distort. It starts to look a little funny. So I do hope that they update the rest of the repertoire when it comes to software instruments and plugins, but I'm very, very happy with the updates with these plugins and instruments. Makes life so much easier. So just to wrap it up in a nutshell, We have optimized loading time. So when you open a session, plugins and virtual instruments are not loaded unless it is immediately necessary for playback. So it doesn't infringe on your loading times, but you have immediate access to it if you so need it. Number 2, we now have auto scroll. So if I select an instrument, open the mixer, it's immediately in focus. If I shift click ascend, it immediately takes me to the aux channel that it sends to. And then we have updated plugins and GUIs with the Deesser 2, the expander, the ring shifter, and sculpture. I'm pumped. I'm excited to dig into this. So I hope that was helpful to you. If it was, as always, I highly suggest subscribing to the YouTube channel, Why Logic Pro Rules, and subscribing on the website itself, whylogicprorules.com. Every week, I'm posting new videos, new posts, new emails to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Thanks so much.